The Boeing 737 cruised at 37,000 feet through crystalline morning air, its passengers lost in the mundane rhythm of commercial flight. Coffee service had ended. Laptops glowed. Business travelers typed urgent emails that would mean nothing in an hour. In row 10, seat C, Major Evangeline Ghost Reyes slept with her head against the window, exhaustion finally claiming her after 18 months of classified missions over disputed Pacific waters. She'd chosen the window seat deliberately, old habits from a woman who'd spent a decade watching horizons for threats that materialized from empty sky. Even unconscious, her breathing remained controlled, measured, the kind of sleep that could shatter in seconds if needed. Her civilian clothes, dark jeans, plain sweater, were a deliberate disguise. No insignia, no rank, just another passenger returning from leave. The flight attendant noticed her hands first, calloused from years gripping control sticks, small scars across the knuckles that spoke of maintenance work in cramped cockpits. But it was the way she held her shoulders, even while sleeping, that marked her as military. Tension coiled like a spring, ready to release. At 11:17 a.m., everything changed. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom, artificially calm but edged with something passengers couldn't identify. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've received instructions from air traffic control to deviate from our flight path. This is routine. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." But Ghost's eyes snapped open. She'd heard that tone before, in briefing rooms when colonels tried to make catastrophic news sound manageable. Her hand moved instinctively to her left wrist, where a bradling chronograph had been replaced by a plastic fitness tracker. Cover identity. But her internal clock, honed by years of mission timing, told her this wasn't routine. The aircraft banked left, sharper than any commercial maneuver she'd experienced as a passenger. Through the window, she watched the horizon tilt as they descended toward what looked like empty ocean. No airports below, no logical destination. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. Tower to Ghost. Authentication Tango 77. Acknowledge receipt. The blood drained from her face. Authentication codes were reserved for operational emergencies, active threat scenarios, but she was on leave. Officially, she didn't exist for the next 2 weeks. Another message arrived. Navy requesting immediate identification of Major Onboard. Passenger manifest flagged. Stand by for instructions. Ghost stared at the screen, her mind racing through possibilities. 3 rows ahead, a man in a navy polo shirt was typing frantically on his phone, glancing around the cabin with barely concealed panic. 2 rows behind, a woman in business attire had stopped pretending to read, her eyes scanning faces with predatory focus. The plane continued its descent toward coordinates that didn't match any published airport approach. Ghost understood with crystalline clarity. Someone on this flight had blown her cover. The morning sun streamed through reinforced glass as Major Evangeline Reyes reached beneath her seat for the emergency kit she always carried. Old habits from a woman whose real job was hunting things that shouldn't exist in civilized airspace. The authentication code burned in her memory. Tango 77 meant immediate deployment authorization. But she was supposed to be invisible for 2 weeks, recovering from operations that officially never happened. Her fingers found the small titanium case disguised as a portable battery pack. Inside, encrypted satellite phone, emergency credentials, and a ceramic knife that had passed through security because it read as medical equipment on X-ray scanners. She palmed the phone, keeping movements minimal. The aircraft's descent steepened. Through the window, Ghost recognized the approach pattern, not toward any civilian airport, but toward a coordinates-only landing zone. Military precision flying. Someone had hijacked their flight plan with authority that superseded commercial aviation. Her phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. Scramble authorization Hotel 7 Alpha. Chinese naval formations detected 17 minutes ago. Pacific Fleet requesting immediate tactical assessment. Ghost's blood chilled. Hotel 7 Alpha was a War Games designation, but the timestamp on these coordinates placed them inside international waters where China had been conducting routine exercises for weeks. Exercises that her classified reconnaissance flights had revealed as something far more aggressive. The man in the navy polo stood up, moving toward the bathroom with obvious agitation. As he passed her row, Ghost caught the insignia outline pressed into his shirt pocket, submarine service pin. Naval intelligence, trying too hard to blend in. His panicked typing made sense now. Someone had burned multiple covers simultaneously. The businesswoman, too, rose back, was photographing passengers with her phone, pretending to take selfies. Each shot captured faces, documenting who was aboard, professional technique, foreign intelligence most likely. Ghost activated her satellite phone beneath the airline blanket, typing a response to the unknown number. Ghost acknowledges. Require authentication from handler. Current operational status unclear. The reply came instantly. Authentication confirmed. Handler designation Seawolf. Your cover is compromised. Chinese assets tracking military personnel on civilian flights. Flight 447 contains at least 3 compromised passengers. Emergency diversion to classified airstrip. Through her window, Ghost watched 2 F-18 Super Hornets materialize from cloud cover, flanking their aircraft. The distinctive blue-gray paint scheme of Navy fighters, close enough to see pilot helmets. They weren't escorting, they were containing. The pilot's voice returned, abandoning all pretense of routine. This is Captain Morrison. We have military escort and are proceeding to unscheduled landing. All passengers will remain seated. This aircraft is now under federal jurisdiction. Around the cabin, reactions varied. Nervous laughter from tourists, concerned murmurs from business travelers. But Ghost watched the key players. Navy polo shirt had gone pale, staring at his phone screen. Businesswoman was no longer photographing, instead texting rapidly in what looked like Mandarin characters. The most dangerous person aboard was probably someone she hadn't identified yet. Her secure phone displayed new coordinates, a naval air station that didn't appear on civilian maps, somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, based on their current heading. The kind of place where aircrafts landed and disappeared into classified hangars. Ghost realized she'd been played from the moment she boarded. The question was whether she was bait or prey. Naval Air Station Whidbey Island materialized through morning haze as Flight 447 completed its unauthorized descent. Ghost recognized the facility from classified briefings, home to EA-18G Growler squadrons and deep black reconnaissance programs that officially didn't exist. The kind of place where civilian aircraft never landed unless something had gone catastrophically wrong. Their Boeing 737 touched down on a runway designed for military fighters, escorted by the 2 Super Hornets that had shepherded them from cruising altitude. Through her window, Ghost watched ground crews in digital camouflage surrounding the aircraft before the engines finished spooling down. No normal airport procedures. No jet bridge. Just armed personnel establishing a perimeter. The pilot's final announcement carried the weight of someone who understood he'd become part of something beyond commercial aviation. Ladies and gentlemen, remain seated. Federal agents will be boarding shortly for passenger identification. This is for your safety and national security. Ghost's secure phone displayed a final message from her handler. Seawolf to Ghost. Prepare for immediate operational briefing. Chinese submarine detected off Washington coast 30 minutes ago. Your Pacific reconnaissance data is now critical intelligence. Cover blown, but mission continues. The cabin door opened. Instead of flight attendants, 3 individuals in plain clothes boarded, 2 men and 1 woman, all carrying the subtle bulges and confident movements of federal agents. Behind them, A Navy commander in dress blues surveyed the passenger manifest with grim efficiency. "Major Rays," the commander's voice cut through cabin noise. Every head turned toward row 10, where Ghost slowly raised her hand. "Sir." The navy polo shirt man was sweating now, his phone clutched in white knuckles. The businesswoman had stopped all pretense of casual travel, sitting rigidly while watching the agents move through the cabin. But it was the elderly man in row 3 who caught Ghost's attention. Silver hair, expensive suit, reading glasses perched on a nose that suggested Eastern European heritage. He'd been invisible throughout the flight, perfectly, professionally invisible. When the commander called for Major Rays, the old man's eyes had moved to assess her with calculation that spoke of decades in intelligence work. "Ma'am, if you would please come with us," the commander continued. "We have a situation requiring your immediate expertise." Ghost stood, leaving her carry-on bag but palming the emergency kit. As she moved toward the aisle, the old man spoke quietly in accented English. "Major, you might find the view from the cockpit educational." The words seemed innocuous, but Ghost's training recognized the phrasing, a coded message format used by Warsaw-Pact intelligence services. Her mind raced through possibilities: Russian operative, double agent, or something more complex. The federal agents were systematically collecting phones from specific passengers. Navy polo shirt, businesswoman, but not the old man. He was being treated as a friendly asset, not a person of interest. Ghost realized the scope of the operation was far larger than her blown cover. Someone had orchestrated events to get specific individuals onto this flight, knowing it would be diverted to Whidbey Island. The question was whether she was a target or a tool in someone else's game. As they escorted her from the aircraft, she caught the old man watching her with the satisfied expression of someone whose carefully laid plans were proceeding perfectly. The morning air at Whidbey Island carried the salt tang of Puget Sound and the sharp scent of jet fuel as Ghost was led across the tarmac toward a nondescript building marked only with numbers. Behind her, other passengers were being processed with varying degrees of scrutiny. Navy polo shirt was in flex cuffs, shouting about diplomatic immunity. The businesswoman was speaking rapidly into a phone the agents had somehow missed. But the elderly man was walking freely beside another commander, engaged in what looked like friendly conversation. Inside the briefing facility, Ghost found herself in a windowless room dominated by multiple screens displaying satellite imagery of the Pacific Ocean. Red dots marked Chinese naval formations. Blue triangles showed American assets. But it was the orange markers that drew her attention, unidentified submarines moving in patterns that suggested coordinated intelligence gathering. "Major Rays, I'm Commander Sarah Walsh, ONI," the woman who'd boarded the aircraft announced, settling into a chair across from Ghost. "Office of Naval Intelligence." This had escalated beyond routine counterintelligence. "We need to discuss your reconnaissance flights over the South China Sea." "Sir, those missions are classified beyond my clearance to discuss without proper authorization," Ghost replied, maintaining protocol despite the surreal circumstances. Walsh slid a folder across the table. Inside, photographs from Ghost's cockpit cameras showed Chinese naval formations that were supposed to be conducting routine exercises. But Ghost's trained eye had captured details that revealed something far more significant: coordinated submarine deployment patterns consistent with prepositioning for offensive operations. 3 hours ago, one of these submarines was detected 12 miles off the Washington coast, Walsh continued. "Your photographs are the only intelligence we have showing their full deployment pattern. We need your tactical assessment." Ghost studied the images, her mind automatically analyzing what she documented during flights that had seemed routine at the time. "Sir, these formations aren't defensive. The submarines are positioned to interdict maritime traffic, not protect Chinese assets. if they're mirroring these patterns off our coast. They're preparing to establish a blockade zone, Walsh finished. Exactly what our analysts concluded, but we needed confirmation from someone who'd observed their tactics firsthand. The door opened, and the elderly man from row 3 entered, now carrying himself with the authority of someone accustomed to command. "Major, forgive the deception. I am Admiral Petrov, Russian Naval Intelligence, retired but still concerned about Chinese expansion in the Pacific." Ghost's hand moved instinctively toward where her sidearm would normally be holstered, but Admiral Petrov raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "I am here as friend, Major. Russia has no interest in Chinese control of Pacific shipping lanes. My government asked me to observe Chinese submarine tactics during your reconnaissance flights." "You've been tracking my missions," Ghost demanded. "We have been tracking everyone's missions, Major. Chinese intelligence has been monitoring American reconnaissance patterns for months. Your flights revealed their submarine positions, but also revealed that they know exactly when and where you fly." Commander Walsh activated another screen showing communication intercepts in Mandarin. Admiral Petrov provided these intercepts, proving Chinese forces were prepared for your reconnaissance missions. They've been feeding you intelligence, Major. The question is why? Ghost stared at the evidence, realizing her supposedly covert missions had been theater for an audience she'd never known existed. The revelation hit Ghost like decompression sickness, sudden, disorienting, and dangerous. Her carefully planned reconnaissance flights, missions she'd risked her life to complete, had been orchestrated theater. The Chinese hadn't been surprised by her surveillance. They'd been performing for her cameras. "How long?" she asked, her voice steady despite the implications cascading through her mind. Admiral Petrov consulted a tablet displaying Russian intelligence summaries. "4 months, Major. Since your first flight over the Spratly Islands. Chinese communications intercepts show they designated you Ghost Bird, a reconnaissance asset to be managed rather than eliminated." Commander Walsh activated another display showing Ghost's flight paths overlaid with Chinese submarine positions. The patterns were too perfect, too conveniently positioned for optimal intelligence gathering. "They wanted us to see specific formations while hiding others. Your photographs show exactly what they intended." Ghost studied the tactical display, her pilot's mind automatically calculating approach vectors and escape routes. But something else caught her attention, subtle variations in Chinese submarine spacing that suggested hasty repositioning. "Sir, these formations show stress points. Look at the gaps between vessels here and here." She indicated irregular spacing on the display. "This isn't a planned deployment pattern. They're responding to something unexpected." "What kind of unexpected?" Walsh asked. "Another player in the area, someone they didn't plan for." Ghost traced the submarine positions with her finger. "These gaps suggest they're maintaining safe distance from unidentified sonar contacts. Something's out there that they can't classify." Admiral Petrov smiled grimly. "Very perceptive, Major. There are indeed additional players. American submarines your own Navy has not briefed you about. Deep black assets conducting their own surveillance." The room fell silent except for the hum of electronics. Ghost realized she was sitting at the intersection of multiple intelligence operations, each layer hidden from the others. The Chinese were performing for her surveillance while secretly tracking American black operations. The Russians were monitoring everyone while feeding selected intelligence to American assets. And somewhere beneath the Pacific, unacknowledged American submarines were gathering intelligence that even she wasn't cleared to know about. "What was my real mission?" Ghost asked. Walsh exchanged glances with Admiral Petrov before responding. "To be exactly who you are, Major. A competent pilot gathering intelligence you believed was covert. Your genuine reactions to Chinese formations provided authentic baseline data for analyzing their deception operations. I was unknowing bait. You were authentic reconnaissance that couldn't be faked." Petrov corrected. Chinese intelligence can identify staged surveillance, but not a pilot genuinely believing she was conducting covert operations. Your flight patterns, your tactical decisions, your camera positioning, all authentic because you believed your mission was real. Ghost absorbed this, understanding now why her cover had been blown only after months of successful flights. Someone had decided her usefulness as unknowing authentic reconnaissance was finished. But the timing suggested new urgency. "Why extract me now?" she asked. Walsh activated a new display showing real-time satellite imagery. Because 12 hours ago, one of those unacknowledged American submarines went silent in waters where Chinese formations were supposedly conducting exercises. We need your tactical assessment of Chinese capabilities to determine if they detected and engaged our asset. Ghost stared at the coordinates. She'd photographed that exact location 6 days earlier. The coordinates burned into Ghost's memory. Latitude 47.3428, longitude 124.7853. 6 days ago, she'd captured detailed photographs of what appeared to be routine Chinese naval exercises in international waters off the Washington coast. Now, starring at the same location on real-time satellite displays, she understood why her extraction had become urgent. "The submarine that went silent," Ghost said, her pilot's mind automatically calculating approach vectors and depth profiles for the area. What was its mission? Commander Walsh hesitated before answering. USS Connecticut, Virginia-class attack submarine. Deep reconnaissance of Chinese formation communications. They were monitoring encrypted transmissions between Chinese vessels to determine if the exercises were cover for prepositioning offensive assets. Ghost studied the satellite imagery, noting subtle changes in vessel positioning since her last reconnaissance flight. "The Chinese formations have shifted significantly since my last photographs. They've established a search pattern." She traced the new positions on the display. "This isn't exercise positioning anymore. They're conducting active submarine hunting." Admiral Petrov nodded grimly. Russian satellites detected underwater explosions in that area 18 hours ago. Minor detonations consistent with depth charges or submarine-launched torpedoes, but no debris field, no distress signals from Connecticut. The implication struck Ghost like a physical blow. An American nuclear submarine, possibly destroyed by Chinese forces in international waters. If confirmed, it would represent the first direct military engagement between superpowers in decades. The kind of incident that could escalate beyond anyone's ability to control. "My photographs," Ghost realized aloud. "The Chinese formations I documented, they weren't exercises, they were trap positioning. We believe Connecticut was lured into the area using intelligence the Chinese knew we would collect through your reconnaissance," Walsh confirmed. "Your genuine surveillance provided authentic targeting data that made the submarine's mission irresistible to our planners." Ghost felt the weight of unintended consequences. Her authentic reconnaissance, designed to gather intelligence on Chinese capabilities, had instead provided the bait for an American submarine to sail into prepared kill zones. Connecticut's crew of 130 sailors, possibly dead because her photographs had been too convincing. But something in the tactical display nagged at her trained eye. "Commander, the Chinese search pattern. It's wrong for successful submarine destruction. Look at the spacing and methodology." She indicated the current Chinese vessel positions. "They're searching like they damaged but didn't destroy Connecticut. This is recovery positioning, not victory formation." Admiral Petrov studied Ghost's analysis. "You believe Connecticut survived the initial engagement. Damaged, possibly emergency surfaced outside of detection range, but likely intact. The Chinese are hunting a wounded submarine, not celebrating a kill." Ghost's mind raced through tactical possibilities. If Connecticut is still operational but damaged, they would need immediate support, and the Chinese know it. Walsh activated communication displays showing encrypted traffic between naval commands. We have 3 submarine rescue vessels moving toward the area, but Chinese formations are positioned to intercept any rescue operation. It's become a siege scenario. Ghost realized the scope of the crisis. An American submarine trapped in hostile-controlled waters, Chinese forces positioned to prevent rescue, and her reconnaissance photograph serving as the roadmap for both sides. The morning's flight diversion to Whidbey Island suddenly made tactical sense. You need current intelligence on Chinese positions and capabilities, she concluded. We need a pilot who understands their tactical patterns well enough to get close without triggering active engagement. The morning briefing had become an operational planning session, and Ghost understood her role was shifting from intelligence asset to active participant in a submarine rescue mission that could determine whether the Pacific remained peaceful or erupted into open warfare. Ghost stared at the tactical displays, her mind shifting from intelligence analysis to operational planning. The scattered red dots representing Chinese naval formations had become a puzzle she needed to solve, not just to understand their capabilities, but to find gaps that would allow American rescue assets to reach Connecticut without triggering open warfare. "What assets do we have available for rescue operations?" she asked Commander Walsh. 2 Virginia-class submarines moving from Pearl Harbor, estimated arrival in 18 hours. USS Mercy, hospital ship, is being repositioned under the pretense of medical exercises. And Walsh paused, consulting classified notes. We have access to platforms the Chinese don't know about. Admiral Petrov leaned forward. Major, how familiar are you with the EA-18G Growler electronic warfare capabilities? Ghost's pulse quickened. The EA-18G Growler was the Navy's premier electronic warfare aircraft, capable of jamming communications, disrupting radar systems, and creating electronic confusion that could blind enemy formations. Sir, I'm carrier qualified in the Super Hornet family, including Growler variants, but electronic warfare missions require specialized training, which you received during classified operations over the South China Sea, Walsh revealed, sliding another folder across the table. Your official record shows standard reconnaissance training. Your actual qualifications include advanced electronic warfare and combat identification protocols. Ghost opened the folder, finding mission reports she'd filed under different classification levels. Operations that had been compartmentalized even from her own memory, designed to maintain plausible deniability if captured. But now, facing the mission parameters displayed on the screens around them, those fragmented training memories were crystallizing into tactical understanding. You want me to conduct electronic warfare against Chinese formations to create confusion for rescue operations, she concluded. More specifically, Admiral Petrov interjected, we need someone who understands Chinese tactical patterns well enough to predict their responses to electronic interference. Your reconnaissance flights documented not just their positions, but their communication protocols and radar deployment patterns. Walsh activated a new display showing potential flight paths through the Chinese-controlled area. A single Growler, flown by someone with intimate knowledge of Chinese formation tactics, could create enough electronic disruption to mask rescue submarine movements without triggering active engagement. Ghost studied the proposed mission parameters. Electronic warfare flights were among the most dangerous in naval aviation, aircraft operating alone in hostile airspace, relying on countermeasures and pilot skill rather than weapons or escorts. But the tactical requirements made sense. Connecticut needed rescue, and conventional approaches would result in direct military engagement between superpowers. Timeline, she asked. Connecticut's emergency locator beacon activated 40 minutes ago, Walsh revealed. Automated distress signal on secure frequencies. They're alive but in critical condition. Chinese formations are converging on the signal location. We estimate 6 hours before they achieve complete containment. 6 hours to plan, brief, and execute an electronic warfare mission that could determine whether 130 American sailors lived or died. 6 hours to prevent the Pacific crisis from escalating to direct military engagement. Ghost realized her morning coffee and routine flight home had become the opening moves of a chess game played with submarines and electronic warfare aircraft, where her knowledge of Chinese tactics had transformed her from passenger to key player. I'll need complete mission briefing, current weather data, and full specification on Chinese electronic countermeasures, she said. The room's atmosphere shifted as her acceptance transformed contingency planning into operational reality. Within 30 minutes, Ghost found herself in a flight suit that felt both foreign and familiar after months of civilian clothes. The VFA 129 squadron patch on her shoulder, a stylized lightning bolt piercing storm clouds, carried new significance as she walked toward the growler that would determine Connecticut's fate. The EA-18G waited in a hardened shelter, its distinctive electronic warfare pods giving the aircraft an aggressive, predatory appearance. Unlike the sleek reconnaissance aircraft she'd flown over the South China Sea, the Growler was designed for electronic combat, jamming enemy communications, disrupting radar systems, and creating electromagnetic chaos that could blind entire naval formations. Chief Petty Officer Martinez conducted the pre-flight briefing with the efficiency of someone who understood they were racing against Chinese naval forces closing on Connecticut's position. "Ma'am, we've loaded the pods with the latest Chinese frequency analysis from your reconnaissance flights. The system will automatically target their communication networks and radar frequencies." Ghost ran her hands over the aircraft's electronic warfare controls, muscle memory from classified training sessions, returning despite months away from operational flying. The Growler's systems were more sophisticated than anything she'd flown, but the basic principles remained constant. Identify enemy electronic signatures, overwhelm them with precisely targeted interference, and escape before they could respond effectively. "Weather update," Lieutenant Commander Torres announced, consulting latest meteorological data. "Storm front moving in from the Pacific. Cloud ceiling at 8,000 feet, visibility down to 3 miles in precipitation. Advantage to us, Chinese radar effectiveness will be reduced, but it also limits our electronic warfare range." Admiral Petrov approached with final intelligence updates. Chinese formations have established 3 concentric search rings around Connecticut's last known position. Inner ring, destroyers with active sonar. Middle ring, frigates with electronic surveillance equipment. Outer ring, submarines positioned to intercept any rescue attempts. Ghost studied the tactical display, her pilot's mind automatically calculating approach vectors that would maximize electronic warfare effectiveness, while minimizing exposure to Chinese defensive systems. The storm front actually provided tactical opportunity. Weather interference would mask her electronic signatures until she was close enough to effectively target Chinese formations. "Flight plan takes you north along the coast, then west toward the search area," Commander Walsh explained. "You'll approach from the direction of commercial shipping lanes, masquerading as routine patrol until you're within effective jamming range." "Rules of engagement?" Ghost asked. "Electronic warfare only. No kinetic weapons authorized under any circumstances. If you're targeted by Chinese surface-to-air missiles, you're cleared to defend yourself, but engagement must remain deniable." Ghost understood the implications. She would be conducting aggressive electronic warfare against Chinese naval forces while maintaining the pretense of routine patrol operations. If successful, Chinese communications would be disrupted long enough for American submarines to approach Connecticut without detection. If unsuccessful, she could trigger the first air-to-surface engagement between superpowers in decades. The Growler's engine spooled to life with the distinctive whine of military turbofans. Ghost settled into the cockpit, her hands automatically finding familiar controls despite the aircraft's advanced electronic warfare systems. Through the canopy, she could see storm clouds building over the Pacific, weather that would either provide cover for her mission or create additional hazards for an already dangerous flight. As she taxied toward the runway, Ghost realized her transition from reconnaissance pilot to electronic warfare operator represented more than just a change in aircraft. She was becoming an active participant in determining whether the Pacific remained peaceful or erupted into open military conflict. The tower cleared her for takeoff into weather that promised to test both her flying skills and her ability to conduct precision electronic warfare in challenging conditions. The Growler lifted off into gray Pacific sky, its twin engines carving through morning air that carried the promise of worsening weather. Ghost climbed through the cloud deck, feeling the aircraft respond to her inputs with the precision of military engineering designed for exactly this type of mission. Below, Whidbey Island disappeared into coastal haze as she turned west toward coordinates where Connecticut waited for rescue that might never come. At 15,000 feet, she broke through the storm front into clear air above the clouds, where the Pacific stretched endlessly toward horizons that concealed Chinese naval formations. Her electronic warfare systems painted a complex picture on multifunction displays, radar contacts, communication signals, and electromagnetic signatures that revealed the invisible battle space below the weather. Seawolf to Ghost, radio check. Her handler's voice crackled through encrypted communications. Ghost to Seawolf, clear reception. Electronic warfare systems active, monitoring Chinese frequencies. Copy Ghost. Latest intelligence shows Connecticut transmitted emergency locator signal 47 minutes ago. Chinese formations are converging on the beacon location. Estimate you have 4 hours before they achieve complete containment. Ghost acknowledged while studying tactical displays that showed the developing situation with crystalline clarity. 3 concentric rings of Chinese vessels, exactly as Admiral Petrov had briefed, tightening around Connecticut's position like a noose. But her trained eye caught subtle patterns in their formation movement, gaps in coverage created by weather interference and tactical positioning that prioritized submarine hunting over air defense. The storm front below provided perfect cover for her approach. Chinese radar systems would be degraded by weather returns, masking her electronic signature until she was close enough for effective jamming operations. But the same weather that concealed her approach would make precision flying more challenging when she descended into the operational area. Ghost to Seawolf, request authorization to descend to operational altitude. Seawolf copies. You are cleared to descend and commence electronic warfare operations. Rules of engagement unchanged. Electronic interference only, no kinetic engagement authorized. Ghost pushed the Growler into a controlled descent, feeling the aircraft shake as it penetrated the storm front. Rain streaked the canopy while turbulence tested her control inputs, but military training had prepared her for exactly these conditions. Electronic warfare missions were conducted in the worst possible weather, when enemy defensive systems were compromised and detection probability was lowest. At 8,000 feet, just below the cloud ceiling, her electronic warfare systems began detecting Chinese radar and communication signals with startling clarity. The formations below were maintaining active electronic surveillance, their signatures painting detailed pictures on her displays. But more importantly, she could monitor their tactical communications, encrypted transmissions that revealed their search patterns and coordination protocols. What she heard through her electronic intercept equipment sent chills through her training-conditioned reflexes. Chinese naval commanders were discussing not just Connecticut's location, but the approach routes American rescue submarines would most likely use. They weren't just hunting one damaged submarine. They were preparing to engage any rescue attempt with overwhelming force. The mission parameters had shifted from submarine rescue to preventing a naval battle that could escalate beyond anyone's ability to control. Ghost realized her electronic warfare capabilities represented the only way to create enough confusion to allow rescue operations without triggering open warfare. She armed her jamming systems and began the final approach toward coordinates where Connecticut waited in increasingly desperate circumstances. Ghost descended through the storm front into tactical airspace, where electronic warfare would determine whether Connecticut's crew survived or became casualties of superpower rivalry. At 5,000 feet, just below the cloud ceiling, her Growler's advanced sensors painted a detailed picture of Chinese naval formations that were more sophisticated and aggressive than any intelligence briefing had suggested. The inner ring of Chinese destroyers had established a sonar search pattern that covered every possible escape route from Connecticut's position. Their active sonar pulses, visible on Ghost's electronic displays as regular bursts of acoustic energy, were systematically mapping the ocean floor to locate a damaged American submarine that had nowhere to hide. But it was the communication intercepts that revealed the true scope of Chinese intentions. Through her encrypted headset, Ghost monitored tactical conversations between Chinese naval commanders that suggested they were prepared to engage any rescue attempt with lethal force. This wasn't just submarine hunting. It was a carefully orchestrated trap designed to create a military incident that would shift Pacific power dynamics permanently. Seawolf to Ghost were monitoring the same communications. Chinese formations appear to be establishing engagement zones around Connecticut's position. Rescue submarines are being positioned as hostile contacts. Ghost acknowledged while activating her electronic warfare systems. The Growler's jamming pods hummed to life, their sophisticated transmitters preparing to flood Chinese frequencies with carefully targeted interference. But electronic warfare required precision. Too little jamming and Chinese coordination would remain effective. Too much and she would reveal her position to defensive systems designed to eliminate threats like her aircraft. She began with communication jamming, targeting the encrypted frequencies Chinese naval units were using for tactical coordination. Her electronic warfare systems had been programmed with frequency analysis from her reconnaissance flights, allowing precise targeting of Chinese communication protocols. Within seconds, the tactical conversations she'd been monitoring dissolved into static as her jamming overwhelmed their radio networks. The Chinese response was immediate and professional. Their formations shifted to backup communication frequencies, while their electronic surveillance systems began searching for the source of jamming. Ghost watched on her displays as Chinese radar signatures changed from routine search patterns to active threat assessment. They knew they were under electronic attack and were preparing to respond. She expanded her jamming to include Chinese radar systems, flooding their surveillance frequencies with electronic noise that would degrade their ability to track surface and subsurface contacts. The storm front provided additional interference, creating an electromagnetic environment where Chinese formations would be partially blind to American submarine movements. Through breaks in the weather, Ghost caught visual confirmation of the tactical situation. Chinese destroyers and frigates spread across gray Pacific waters in formation patterns that spoke of military precision and hostile intent. Steam rose from their superstructures in the cold morning air, while their radar arrays rotated with mechanical determination as they searched for targets to engage. But her electronic warfare was working. Chinese formations were breaking coordination, their movements becoming less precise as communication jamming forced them to operate independently rather than as coordinated battle groups. The tactical advantage was shifting toward American rescue operations, but Ghost knew her electronic interference could be maintained for only a limited time before Chinese forces adapted or located her aircraft. Ghost to Seawolf, Electronic warfare operations in progress. Chinese coordination is degraded, but they're adapting quickly. Estimate effective jamming window of 20 minutes before they establish countermeasures. 20 minutes for American submarines to approach Connecticut's position without detection. 20 minutes to extract 130 sailors before Chinese forces regained full tactical coordination. Ghost realized she was watching the clock tick down on what might be the most critical submarine rescue operation in naval history. The electronic battle unfolding around Ghost's aircraft had become a deadly chess game played at the speed of light across Pacific waters that concealed more than just a damaged American submarine. Through her Growler's sophisticated sensors, she watched Chinese formations struggle to maintain coordination as her jamming systems flooded their communication frequencies with precisely targeted interference. But the Chinese were adapting faster than intelligence estimates had predicted. Their naval commanders were switching to backup frequencies and implementing communication protocols that suggested extensive preparation for exactly this type of electronic warfare scenario. Ghost realized they had anticipated American electronic interference and had developed countermeasures specifically designed to maintain tactical coordination under jamming conditions. Seawolf to Ghost, we're detecting Chinese adaptation to your electronic warfare operations. They're establishing hardened communication networks that are partially resistant to jamming. Ghost acknowledged while expanding her jamming operations to cover additional frequency ranges. The Growler's electronic warfare systems were among the most advanced in the world, but they were facing Chinese countermeasures that revealed sophisticated understanding of American capabilities. This wasn't just routine naval exercises. The Chinese had been preparing for electronic warfare scenarios involving American rescue operations. Through gaps in her jamming coverage, she monitored Chinese tactical communications that revealed disturbing intelligence. They weren't just hunting Connecticut. They had detected the approach of American rescue submarines and were positioning to intercept them with overwhelming force. The submarine rescue operation had been compromised before it began. Ghost to Seawolf, Chinese formations are repositioning to intercept approaching rescue assets. They have intelligence on American submarine movements. The response came with barely contained urgency. Seawolf copies. Intelligence suggests Chinese forces have been monitoring our rescue preparations. The submarine rescue operation may be compromised. Ghost realized the scope of the intelligence failure. Chinese naval forces weren't just reacting to Connecticut's distress signal. They had been tracking American rescue preparations and were prepared to engage rescue submarines the moment they entered the operational area. Her electronic warfare operations were buying time, but time that might not be enough to prevent a naval engagement between superpowers. She expanded her jamming operations to maximum power, flooding Chinese frequencies with electronic interference that degraded their coordination capabilities, but also revealed her position to their defensive systems. Through her radar warning receivers, she detected Chinese surface-to-air missile systems beginning to track her aircraft. The electronic warfare mission was escalating toward direct engagement. Ghost to Seawolf, Chinese air defense systems are tracking my position. Request guidance on defensive measures. Seawolf to Ghost, you are authorized to defend yourself but maintain electronic warfare operations as long as possible. American submarines are 20 minutes from Connecticut's position. 20 minutes. Ghost understood that her ability to maintain electronic warfare operations for that duration would determine whether the submarine rescue succeeded or escalated into open warfare. She pushed her jamming systems to maximum output, accepting that increased electronic emissions